is Sky News Real Estate. Smart investing.
Hello and welcome to Smart Investing. I'm James Treble, filling in for Chris Gray tonight. And on the show, we want to know, is auction the best way for you to be buying your property? Can it guarantee the seller a premium price? And what are the best strategies for winning at auction? Now, joining us tonight is Justin Nickerson from Gavel Auctions and a big favourite of the show, Charles Tarbay, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. I'd like to start with you. Tell us, what do you think is, a reason why you're entering into auctions, and tell us about Gavel Auctions.
Sure. Well, I love the negotiation sides. That's always what's been drawn to me in my primary career as an auctioneer. So I've always been around the real estate industry as an agent, then an auctioneer after that. But negotiation for me and auction really is the most public form of negotiation. So my role now is I head up a company called Apollo Auctions, but also the national ambassador for Gavel. Okay. And Gavel's a live streaming and bidding app that was launched in November 2016, right. Which I'm very passionate about because it really does increase the transparency for the industry, which is a really good thing. And obviously Gavel is the name of the hammer going down, for those who don't know that at home. I watched that hammer go for many, many years. Yeah. Now, why do you think that agents rather think that auction is the way to go, and why are they such a big fan of it? I obviously am, because we do 6 hours live here every Saturday following auctions, but why do you think that the agents think it's such a good thing to do? Yeah, look, I think we always say there's two key ingredients that happen when the best price occurs. That's competition and emotion, and that's the forefront of auctions. Auctions put emotional people in emotional situations, harnessing that competition to try and get the best possible price. So I think agents recognise that whatever has been the best sale of their career, both those elements have been present in that, and auction just harnesses that environment. Sure. Charles, what do you think? I mean, in the good old days when I was a real estate agent, back in the late 80s, auctioneer was actually not always happening. It was more for unique properties with a great view or something that was a bit quirky. Why do you think that it's so? Well, I've been an auctioneer for many, many years, and I look at that process, as you mentioned, emotion and competition. The issue is in some areas the competition doesn't exist, and that's where the auctioneer has to work incredibly hard, because you get areas where there's multiple styles of homes, a multiple number of homes that are exactly the same. Yes. So a lot of people have got a choice, so they move around, they don't put themselves under pressure. But the biggest issue with real estate industry today is the lack of negotiating skills, and this is why auctions work in that sense, because most of the agents that came into the industry in the last 4 or 5 years have not had to negotiate. Yes. Because it's up. They get the property for sale. It's been flying away by itself. And this is why you see a lot of them posting about their successes. But if you look lately, you see very, very little posting. And I think that's what's happened. So the negotiation part of an auction is a critical part. But that's where, again, it comes into having an auctioneer that really understands how to draw that little bit extra from a crowd. Even when there's only one bidder. Yeah, well, look, we get a full range of auctioneers that we get to watch on Saturday, and I've got clients who are building homes and doing, looking to have property obviously as their investment, and I say watch the show because there's so many different styles of auctioneers out there on the market. When you're dealing with agents, and auction is obviously a part of your life, why do you think that it's not such a good thing sometimes for agents to treat auction as the fallback plan, that final day, everything leads up to that big day? Yeah, look, we sometimes find, and Charles spot on with when he says, is when the market starts to go really well, bad habits generally take place. When the market goes bad, it actually forms good habits. So what we find a lot is that agents, when the market's going really well, they actually quite often sell properties prior to auction. The buyer's there, the seller's there, I'll just get it done and be finished with it. But by doing that, you're probably cutting yourself, 2/3 short, because the competition is really the best way of getting the best price. And we always say the competition is, best done when it's face-to-face. There is a form of competition which is multiple offers, which is behind closed doors, but really that's perceived competition. Free-flowing auctions rely on the best competition, which is I can see my person here who's trying to take my dream deck, my dream view, my dream living room away from me, and I'm going to extend myself to beat them, and that process repeats itself over and over. We were speaking a few weeks ago, Charles, with REI, and talking about renewed call for higher education, particularly in the estate agency, and I think that's got a lot to do with what you just mentioned, the quality of the agents being able to negotiate. Also, we're seeing lots of amazing agents doing tactics or different style. How important do you think through the auction is it, the auctioneer to
to create the energy, to ride it, as much as they are reading the crowd to see where the auction's going to go.
Yeah, it's a process. There is, in the times that I've been involved in auction, I've found that there are always 6 things that could possibly go wrong when listing a property for sale. There are 11 things with private treaty, so it's almost twice as hard. But part of that is the process is not just the auctioneer. The agent plays an amazing role in the process, particularly if they're out in the front garden talking to potential buyers or in-room auctions. They play just as much a role as the auctioneer does. And if the two aren't working together very, very well, that will be the first part of a major issue in an auction when you rely. I remember when I'd auction and the agents hadn't done their 6 parts correctly. They hadn't educated the seller correctly, and in that or they hadn't educated the buyer on the process. And as soon as the auction started, as soon as I started the auction and I started calling for bids, I couldn't see the agents. They'd hide behind a tree or hide behind a bin somewhere because they were too scared to face what the issues were, and that became part of the education process. An auction is a fully staged play that has a script, and the agents have got to play their part in that script.
It's a very interesting way to describe it. Justin, why do you think, now there's an obvious reason why an auction can be seen as great for the vendor, because it's going to achieve the highest price that they want for their property, but it's also good for the buyer. Why do you think that that is?
Well, there's a few reasons, and buyers naturally shy away from auctions. I think it goes against our Australian mentality is laid back. We don't like stepping forward and making a song and a dance about things, and auctions really force you to do the opposite of that. Why it's such a great environment for the buyers, though, is it's transparent. And transparency allows you to make sound decisions when you actually see what your competition is doing and act accordingly. And secondly, I think that the seller's conceding, or the buyers are conceding on the terms, so it's a cash unconditional contract which is in the seller's favour. What that allows the seller to do is be as flexible on their price as they can. You know, we always say you can't win on both. You can't win and have the terms you want and the price you want. You've got a bit of flexibility on one of those. And at an auction, the seller's getting the terms they want, therefore the price can often be at a discount to the buyers because the seller's having the no worries contract in their hand.
We're watching, you know, markets cooling around the country, particularly the capital Sydney and Melbourne, but also recently, the last few weeks, we've seen it cooling off in Adelaide and Brisbane, which is interesting. How important do you think that the auction is playing in that now at the selling of the property process, especially when that's happening?
Yeah, very. It plays a different role. I think the auctions that people picture is the 8, 10, 15 registered bidders, everyone laughing, screaming, crying, you guys interviewing agents and high-fiving and social media posts. But in reality, in those sort of markets, auction plays a role of not making pricing mistakes. So it's a research exercise to see where the market sees the price and presenting that to the seller in a timely fashion, rather than the other alternative, which is, hey, let's put a price on it, let's cross our fingers and let's hope it works. And if it doesn't work, we then drop the price, and we're repeating that exercise until we eventually find the ground zero. Sometimes
sort of damaging the product in that way. The brand.
Well, it can, yeah, it can, and not only that, it extends days on market, which, you know, the sellers come to the market for a reason. They want to be finished and moved on, and it just holds them in that holding pattern for a long period of time.
Just looking at what you were saying there, and we talk about the auction process, there's one thing that I used to say to people when they talk about whether they should or shouldn't go to auction, and that was, in all of the time I've been in real estate, and sadly that's 46 years this year, I've never had anybody, and I opened my first office when I was 21, 77, I've never had anybody walk into my office after looking at a photograph of a home in the window and say, that home you had advertised for this price, I'd like to pay more. And in auction it can happen. But in private treaty, when that price is set, it can only go down.
Sure. Yeah, really good point. Look, it's time now to check what is happening with property markets around Australia with Charles Talbay, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. As we go through, we're going to start off with national auction clearance rates.
Yeah, very interesting stats. Been changing quite a lot, a real lot of late. The national clearance rate for auctions this week came in at 55.8%. And if you look at this time last year, it was 72.4%. Wow. So it's a considerable difference, you know, 14 plus percentage points, or just under 14 percentage points. And Sydney was the interesting one. It came in at 52%, 52.4%. Now, they only had 403 auctions this week. This time last year, there were a lot more auctions, and the clearance rates were a lot higher. And it's the same with Victoria. They had 560 auctions on the weekend, and their clearance rate was 60% on the dot. And again, much, much lower than this time last year. And the one that we've been pointing out as the most successful auction arena for some time is Canberra, and that came in at 67.4. So it topped everybody again, and that's been the case between Adelaide and Canberra. That's been topping the auction clearance rates for quite some time.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think Canberra itself is always very stable. The employment's very stable. They're always releasing suburbs, not just subdivisions. They're releasing suburbs. So there's always a good flow of, and there's always that feeling of, when you think about it, your job is very, very secure. And it's pretty hard for you to lose that role. And
except for maybe election time, huh?
Maybe there is a change, but then there's lots of extra payments that come out at the same time.
Okay. Also, cooling off doesn't affect them. It's been a bit chilly the last few days. I think they're used to it down there in Canberra. Homes advertised for sale.
Yeah, it's been fluctuating up and down, but really in a very, very minor way. This week it was down 0.44%, which is really nothing. But again, if you look at the historical aspect of it, we have 6.61% more properties for sale now than we had this time last year. And again, the same situation is we have tougher borrowing right now. Overseas money is all but disappeared. So you don't have that urgency. So you have more stock, less urgency. So that lends itself to a negotiating market back in there again. If the agents don't learn how to negotiate a transaction, how to put the buyer and seller together in a way that they both feel comfortable about a purchase and a sale, the transaction's not going to happen. This is it.
And that's carrying over after auctions. I mean, we're watching that on Saturday's show where we're seeing it's being passed in, and that's really when the agents have to step
Justin
forward.
will tell you, there's 3 stages to an auction. You can sell it before auction, on the day or after.
Yes.
And quite often in this climate, it's after the auction.
Tell us about residential rent price movements. This is an interesting one.
Yeah, it's slightly down 0.92% this week over last week, so not a lot of movement there. But what I've been doing is tracking the charts since January 2015. I've been trying to match to see the movements of each capital city, and Hobart's still leading with over 25% gain in the last 3 and a bit years in rental return, in increase in rents. Sydney's come back. It's only around 3.5% now in terms of its increase, but the major capital city leader is Melbourne. It's had a growth of just over 12% in its rentals in the 3.5 years since we've been recording this.
You think it's because of new stock? Is it new?
I think Melbourne itself has been a very steady marketplace for a long time. It's the same as Canberra. It's always released stock at the right time, and its pricing hasn't gone crazy. When you look at the Sydney market, where the pricing went crazy for some time because there was no stock release, Melbourne was moving along nicely, like Adelaide. So they've done well, but the 2 areas that have continued to suffer are Perth and Darwin, with 19%, negative 19% and negative 15% respectively in terms of rental growth or decline in that same period.
And big flow on from mining, sort of declining mining boom. What do you think of residential vacancy rates?
Yeah, they're really good. Again, Melbourne's a star performer. It's been winning the vacancy rates for an incredibly long time. And this week is the lowest I've ever seen it. So it's got a 0.49% vacancy. So that means the tenants are going to battle. But if you go across to Perth, it's 8.29%. And it was over 10s. It continues to fluctuate. But this time last week it was 8.92, so it's come back a bit. It still means that landlords are battling over there, and it's not a great place for investment, but it's got a lot of future potential. But that vacancy rate's declining. Sydney came in at 2.18%, so not too bad overall when you look at the 3 capital cities.
Look, we are going to go to a short break, but stay with us because we're going to be talking plenty more auction action.
You're watching Sky News Real Estate, Smart Investing. Welcome back to Sky News Real Estate, Smart Investing.
Welcome back to Smart Investing. We have Justin Nickerson from Gavel Auctions and Charles Tarby, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia, in the studio. Now, Justin, just before the break, we were discussing auction processes and how they work, and Charles made a point, and we were discussing there's 3 different times to sell. There's pre-auction, the auction day, and after auction. This is an important thing because people get so much anxiety if something doesn't happen on the day.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? Explain what you think.
Yeah,
about
auction day is really, people think it's the Super Bowl, Easter, Christmas, everything all rolled into one, but in reality it's 3% of the campaign. So pre-auction gives you a chance to sell it to someone who doesn't want to compete, so they might have missed out on something else. They'll come in hard and try and buy it prior to auction. So you've got the opportunity to sell to someone there. Auction day is the competitive environment that we like, where you get people face-to-face competing. And then post-auction can quite often be people that need terms and conditions attached to the contract, might have seen the property late in the process, or maybe they just don't like auctions and they want to hold off till the price goes on it to give them some sort of a guide. So in this marketplace and with the clearance rates as they are, that third stage becomes increasingly important.
And do you think that's a lot to do with the agents really having that relationship now with their vendors to prepare them to take that sort of jitter, scariness off the day? Because it's a massive thing, you know, this is the most important asset and most expensive one that they own.
Yeah, definitely, and I think they want to try and get through to the vendor that, hey, if it doesn't sell on the day, and as much it's going to be nice if that happens, all is not lost, it's not all toys out of the cot, it's just onto that next stage and attracting that new group of buyers.
Yeah. I'm wondering how important you think it is for people to have a strategy when they're going into auction, for both sides, you know, for the buyer and the seller.
Yeah, it's imperative, and that's why apps like Gavel are so handy, because they allow you to research and build your own strategy. It's stunning, and I'm sure, Charles, you'll back me up on this, it's stunning the amount of people that you meet at their first auction and they're bidding, and you just think, surely at some point in the last 5 years you would have gone to an auction or gone to see one if you know you're going to be buying at auction. So at least you have a bit of an idea of what's going to happen, and then have a strategy, because this decision that you make on the day is going to be one that's probably going to carry ramifications for the next 20, 30, 50 years of your life. So you don't want it to be a whim-based decision, you want it to be something that you're doing with a bit of knowledge.
People do go in unprepared. I mean, in today's environment, especially because auctions are taking a bit longer in the sense of the urgency, you go and visit, you watch an auctioneer do 3 or 4 or 5 auctions, and you get an understanding of their style.
Of course. Yeah.
And I always go and bid on behalf of people. If it's a Century 21 auction, I can't do that because it's not at arm's length. But if it's with another agent, I love it, and I love watching the style of the auctioneers. Some of them will call a property on the market, some of them won't. So you sort of know when and where to bid and how to bid if you follow the patterns of different auctioneers and take notes before it's your turn to turn up and buy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Justin, what do you think some of the misconceptions are that people have about auction day? I mean, it can be a really scary, daunting thing for people to enter into.
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception, there's two. The first one is that it's not a favourable buying environment, and it really is for buyers, you know, for those reasons we mentioned earlier, that they really should try and buy at auction because it is a better situation they're dealing with. But I think the one that we deal with a lot is that people think the best auction buying strategy is the Joe Cool, the sit back, the wait, the
dark glasses with the arms folded.
Yeah. And it's very rarely works. You know, it's the person that gets out in the lead and is actually confident. They generally intimidate the other bidders and they end up with the property. So every time a bid's placed not by you, it actually causes you internal angst. You know, you think, do we bid, do we not bid, do we bid, do we not bid? And that can compound over and over throughout the auction. So that Joe Cool, or the Fonzie style as we call it, is not the one you want to employ. You want to get out in the lead nice and early.
And it's also another thing that's so hard to get the first bid off the rank, isn't it?
Yeah.
We see them now with boxes of chocolates or a bottle of bubbly, to get somebody over the line, because it's sometimes that still moment. I mean, you're here to buy, and the property's for sale. Why do you think it takes something?
I think that's that Australian laid back, don't want to step out of place, don't want to put yourself forward. And we say it's a moment of courage that could secure you a home for the next 20 or 50 years. So sometimes it's just about putting that to the side and thinking, well, yeah, I'm going to have to be uncomfortable for a couple of moments, but gee, in the long run, it's going to be worth it.
But if your agents are working the way they should be working, then it doesn't happen. That bid will happen. That bid will occur. And when I watch auctions, as you now see them on a minute-by-minute basis, you'll know how an auction's going based on watching the agents move around and work the floor, if you like. It really is a stage show, and if your agents are not doing that, you're going to have to work to get that bid, and that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
Justin, you have a 5-step auction strategy. Tell us about this.
Yeah,
I want to hear this.
Yeah, this is the tick. You got the pen ready?
60% of the time it works all the time, as they say. So, number one is do your research. You know, and we spoke about this. It's just so important that either you go and attend auctions or like Gavel and other apps like that, use it to research not only the auctions but your auctioneer, because Charles is right. The style of your auctioneer could dictate the way that you actually bid on the day. Number two is engage with the agent. So make an offer prior to auction, because because quite often they can come back with information that can be very valuable for you, or you might even pick up the property without even having to go through to auction day itself. Number 3 is have your budgets. We say there's 3 budgets. Number 1, there's the dream price, the price that you just love to get it for, and that's usually your starting bid price. Number 2 is the fair price, which is, you know, based upon our research and the local market, this is where we think it's going to go for. And number 3 is your absolute. You've rung up every living relative, you've scoured the back of the couch, and this is your limit, and if it goes $1 more, you're out. So have those budgets in mind prior to the auction day. Number 4, have a strategy. So have a strategy where you're going to start the bidding, you know, how quickly you're going to bid, how quickly jumps you're going to try and go in. And number 5, I think it's just pride comes before the fall. So understand that at the other end of the transaction, particularly if you get into a negotiation, you've probably got another human being who is as emotional, if not more emotional than you. They're letting go of their property they might have held for a number of years. So don't go in the negotiation with your arms crossed and, oh, well, they can take my offer and leave it. Have some empathy for that party, because if you do that and understand what they're going through, it might actually help you get across the line.
What do you think?
I think it's very nice advice, the empathy part of it. I'm not sure how some of the people get pretty aggressive in auctions.
They do.
And they really don't want to show any empathy at all. But I also think there's one more thing that you can add to that, because that's very sound advice. I know that when I go to an auction, I watch people bid, or when they're bidding with me, I advise people, if they're going to go and bid an auction, don't stop halfway. For instance, if the bidding is $795,500 or $799,500, don't let that be your bid, because somebody's going to go to $800.
There's a logic
So
process.
you just don't stop at a halfway point, because somebody is going to go past you. Make sure your bidding is strong and it ends in a strong position, not in a weak position.
Spot on.
What do you think about, you just mentioned then about the process of when bidding, and sometimes it's hard to follow. And what do you give as advice for people, the amounts to bid and how much to go up when they're in the process? I mean, do you do that little bit to slow down the price, or do you do the, you know, a bigger chunk price? As many people have very many different tactics.
Yeah, well, as an auctioneer, I'm always going to say big, bold bids, because that helps us out. But I always think that small bids give the other bidders confidence, because small bids show that you're getting close to your limit, which actually spurs them on. So I think you're better off, if you can, varying the bids that you place. But I actually think the best strategy is bidding quickly. Bidding quickly gives the sense that you don't really fear where it's going to stop. If you are, you know, sitting there and discussing every bid that you place, it shows that clearly you're close to the limit that you're at. So I think bidding quickly is a really good strategy, because it just forces the pressure back on the person you're bidding against all the time.
Yeah, look, it's a very good advice. And just finally, what do you think the advantages of buying at auction are?
Well, there's a few. Transparency is the big one that we mentioned. Number 2 is a seller can't be more motivated than going to auction. They've picked the day they want to sell their property. You can't get more motivated than that. So for the buyer, it's just up for them to capitalise on that position of the seller that wants to sell it. And number 3, it's a fair environment where everyone's bidding on the same terms. You know, this person's a cash unconditional contract, so is this person, and this person, this person.
And if you end up with it, you know it's worth it because somebody else is willing to buy it.
Exactly right. So you can see that rather than post-auction, which this person might be on these terms and this person's on that term. So it just allows everyone to have a level playing field, and that should give you confidence.
And watch more auctions on Sky News and go and attend some, because they can be a lot of fun as well, can't they?
Exactly.
Look, that is all we have for tonight. I'd really like to thank our guests, Justin Nickerson and Charles Tarby, for joining us tonight. Until next time, I'm James Treble, and thanks very much for watching.
Information presented on Sky News Real Estate is general in nature. Viewers should seek their own professional advice before purchasing products or services. Sky News Real Estate may receive a fee for commercial arrangements with companies featured in this programming.